in the shadowy realms of history, where fact and folklore intertwine. The tale of Christman Genipperteinga stands as a chilling testament to the power of narrative and the enigma of the past. Said to have been a prolific serial killer, his story emerges from the myths of Rhineland in the late 16th century, a time rife with superstition, where the printed word was as feared as the sword. According to a pamphlet published in the year of his supposed demise in 1581, Genipperteinga's reign of terror spanned over a decade, claiming over 900 lives. A figure that defies belief and yet has ensnared the imagination for centuries. But was he a genuine harbinger of death, or a phantom born from the era's obsession with the macabre? The absence of sorcery or demonic pacts in his narrative deviates from the era's typical villain, offering no supernatural scapegoats for his purported deeds. Instead, we're left with the bare bones of a tale that's as stark as it is sensational. Did Genipperteinga truly exist, or was he the creation of a society enthralled by the gruesome and the grotesque? Did historical records fail to capture his shadow, or was his legend merely a fabrication, a piece of propaganda in an age that understood the value of fear? We delve deep into the heart of this dark mystery, seeking whispers of truth in a cacophony of myth. This is the tale, this is the riddle, this is the historical quarrel of Christman Genipperteinga. Welcome back to Historical Quarrels, everyone. I am your host, Tyler Eckhart. I am here to, first of all, say a big thank you for listening today. And a big thank you for supporting the show and for being, just a really cool person. Because you're listening to the show, so clearly that means you're really cool. And you should give yourself a pat on the back for that. No, but big shout out to everyone that has been leaving reviews and sharing the episodes with people that they know. It's been great. The feedback has been awesome. I'm glad to have been able to entertain so many people with my dumb little sense of humor. It's been really cool. So, and please feel free to reach out. I'm just a guy. I don't know. Maybe you might feel weird if you reach out to me. If you do, that's fine. We can keep it like it is. You're listening and I'm just here talking into your ear. And that's more than fine. We can keep it at that. Never have to talk to you. But I would like to talk to you. It'd be cool. So if you ever feel comfortable with it, go ahead and talk. Announcements for today. Quick announcements are number one. Please, if you haven't already, go check out my other podcast, Hard Homies podcast that I do with my friends. We've been having a lot of fun on that show. It's been a grand old time. And I think you guys will enjoy the last couple episodes. One of my buddies has just been popping off about some stuff, and it's been pretty funny. So, second announcement, I am going to be... So today's episode is actually going to be kind of like the first in a series that I'm planning on doing. As you'll probably have noticed from the runtime of today's episode, it's a little shorter than my 2 3-hour episodes for sure. This is going to be like a history serial killer series where and this is not going to be every episode. This is going to be like once in a blue moon, right? I tried to do it last time with the dog montages. It just didn't work. So I think if I just do something just, like today's episode where I have a killer, I have a tale, and I have facts that I can, talk about, and I can just like today we're going to be going over the history of highway bandit men, or like highway bandit men, and how they impacted the Holy Roman Empire, especially in the Germany area. So, and so what I'll do with the other serial killers is, kind of explain at the time what was going on, kind of give you some context as to like why there might have actually been a serial killer and then give this purported story about one, even though the serial killer may not have actually existed, or the story was fabricated by people at the time. And I don't know, I just think it's interesting. These tales are interesting and it's fun. I know the historical accuracy may be a little off on it. And that's why I'm trying to give you more details, like more historical accuracy as to like the time surrounding it, when it took place, so that way you can understand the context from where the tale sprung out of. And that's what I'm going to try and focus today to do. And then I'll go ahead and read you the tale. Might have a couple fun bits or two in there, and we'll get into it. So announcement 2 is also kind of, me explaining what we're going to do today. Oh, and if you have not listened to the show, it is very NSFW. I do not give two shits about what comes out of my mouth usually. I probably should. I probably should care a little more, but I don't. So take that as you will. And if you don't really care what I say, for the most part, I mean, I'm not going to be, punching down, obviously. I'm not going to say like some crazy, like racist shit. And I don't care. Like, I do care about that. I'm just not going to care about swears or, like if I want to say vagina or pussy or, stick a dick in a pussy, like, stuff like that. If I want to, and if the moment feels like it's right for me to do that, I'm going to do it. And you need to be accepting of me wanting to talk about putting a dick in a pussy. Or putting a pussy on another pussy, or a dick inside of a butthole, even a man's butthole. Okay. I need you to be accepting of that. If you're not, you might want to turn off the episode. Maybe go listen to one of the older episodes. Okay. Okay, moving on. Let's go ahead and jump into today's historical quarrel. So kind of as explained earlier, we're going to be focusing first on the history of robber bandits, or highway robbermen, or Räuberbanden, as they were called in the German tongue. They were a significant part of the social and criminal landscape of the Holy Roman Empire. That's right. Germany was part of the Holy Roman Empire. If you didn't know that, you needed to go to world history. Okay. Particularly in Germany, the Räuberbanden, and that's why they have their own word for it, were assholes. They were prominent as fuck. Their prominence was shaped by various historical and socioeconomic factors from the late Middle Ages into the early modern period, even. Like super modern period. I'm talking like last week. There was some robber bandits in Germany fucking up shit. Okay. No, I'm kidding. So in the 14th to the 15th centuries, we have the decline of the feudal system. It marked a period of significant upheaval across Europe, particularly within the Holy Roman Empire. As the traditional structures of medieval society began to crumble, many knights and nobles faced a profound identity crisis. They didn't know who they were anymore, and they wanted to start experimenting a bit, just like everyone does in college. But for them, it was like a midlife crisis, coupled with, I might want to suck a dick or two. And if you want to suck a dick or two, that's fine. And Jeremy the knight and Gary the feudal lord they did a devil's three-way, right? And this is what would create the demons that would start convincing the robber bandits to go and kill people in Germany. And because of this, we would get the knights being in crisis quite a bit, right? So we have the chivalric code that had defined the lives of knights for centuries. It was being eroded by the socioeconomic changes sweeping across the continent. Stories abound of knights such as Gottfried von Berlichingen, known as Götz, the Iron Hand. He was Götz, who after losing his hand in battle, the Battle of Landshut, he had a prosthesis made and continued to fight. What a badass. Good for him. And rather than retiring honorably, Götz became a mercenary and later was accused of leading a band of rebels, poignantly illustrating the descent from honored knight to rogue warrior. Now, while his tale doesn't necessarily depict him going out killing a bunch of random innocent people, this was all too common, right? So other knights who are probably less than honorable may have felt the need to make some coin, to make some money, because they weren't going to get that money from the government, so they had to go find it elsewhere. And when you got a bunch of dudes who are good at fighting and killing, the one thing that they're going to probably go do is fight and kill. It just makes sense. So as the feudal system faltered, some nobles found the cost of maintaining their estates and the lifestyle expected of their rank unsustainable. They had to downgrade their lifestyle. This is something many modern people today face, right? You know, you have your job, and if you're living above your means, you're going to be living from paycheck to paycheck. But if you're living below your means, for some people, that does mean that you're fucked and you're going to be dying. For other people, it just means that you're, going to be a little cramped for a while as you're living below your means. And these nobles realized that they needed to live below their means and start being a little more cramped in their lifestyle. The notorious Franz von Sickingen is one such example. He, in the early 16th century, used his castles as fortified bases for raids. That's right, he set up little raid bases. Initially a respected knight, economic pressures pushed him to rebel against the Archbishop of Trier, an act that marked his transition into the outright defiance of the established order. It really pissed off the established order there, right? They were like, hey, fuck you. I severed the Pope. I'm positive they didn't have Italian accents back then, but it is what it is. Okay, and then we have the Rhenish Palatine, Palatinate. It was a region that was particularly affected by feudal strife. The once proud knight Hans von Trotha became infamous for his feud with Abbey of Wissenberg, which led to his excommunication. Hans, better known as Hans Trapp, is remembered in local folklore as a ruthless figure who, rather than succumb to the changing times, chose to become a law unto himself. He fought against people. He fought against the established order, the law, right? And basically was he had his image tarnished for doing that. You go against the status quo, and the kings and everyone else and the higher ups, they're going to make sure that you fucking know that you never do that again. And they're going to teach the peasants to make sure that they never, ever get any ideas of thinking of that. Because, like, if a knight can't do that without getting his image tarnished, what the fuck is going to happen to you, little peasant bitch boy, Timmy? Little bitch boy, Timmy, peasant boy? Okay. So, and then not all who turned to banditry were mighty lords. Many were lesser nobles squeezed out by the economic pressures of the age. Heinrich von Holtz, who was a lesser-known knight from the lower nobility, reportedly turned to highway robbery, preying upon the flourishing trade along the Rhine River, until he was captured and executed for his crimes, of course. Because, you got to capture those highway robber bandits, robbermans. And then we have the grand tournaments that once showcased the chivalric ideal became fewer and fewer and fewer. And so this ideal of chivalric code became less important to people. Because the cost to host such events grew prohibitive, and the prize pursues could no longer cover the expenses of participating knights. In the absence of these spectacles, many knights, such as the ill-famed Conrad von Marburg, sought other outlets for their martial prowess, often at the expense of peasantry and the merchant class. Again, you get a dude who's really good at killing, you tell him he can't kill anymore, or he has no outlet for his killing, he will find other people to kill, typically. Okay, and then we have the brutality of the bandit knights, right? So the tales of robber knights are often filled with brutality, such as those surrounding Burkhard von Erlach, who was said to have bathed in the blood of his victims in a misguided attempt to cure his diseases. Yeah, I get it. I like to bathe in the blood of people, and that's how I cure my diseases and totally don't keep getting sick and more sick. No, I mean, I don't. Guys, don't call the cops on me. It's like only one or two people, and they were pedophiles. So, like, are they even people? Though likely apocryphal, such stories captured the terror that these fallen knights inspired in the populace. Kind of reminds me of like the D&D, like Death Knight or the Oathbreaker Paladin sort of deal here. A little more scary, a little more evil, right? Okay, and then we have the disintegration of feudal bonds. So this would really cause a bunch of rifts in society here. The fabric of feudal loyalty frayed as the economic incentives that held it together diminished. So knights like Eberhard von Windenberg openly defected from their liege lords, turning their fortified homes into dens of thieves from which they could launch raids on the burgeoning commerce routes. I loved those commerce routes. Commerce routes. My God, I can't even speak English. And so by the close of the 15th century, the era of the robber knight was drawing, completely to a close here. And it was going to just turn into, robber peasants as the burgeoning states of the Holy Roman Empire began to assert greater control. Yet the legends of these noble outlaws persisted, their stories echoing through the ages as romanticized anti-heroes or downright villains who, again, bathed in people's blood. Some of these guys would fight against the inexorable march of progress and the end of their way of life in their time. So, kind of going back a little bit too. Another part of what caused these guys to come out was the Black Death. It swept through Europe in 1347. It was like a cataclysm unlike any other in human history. And by the time the initial wave subsided around 1350, it had left a trail of devastation that fundamentally altered the social and economic fabric of the continent. The mortality rate was staggering, to say the least, with estimates suggesting that between 75 million and 200 million people fucking died, accounting for approximately 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population at the time. Every other person died of this shit. When we have people comparing, I don't know, like COVID to the Black Death, I'm like, no, modern medicine is, definitely better. I would say like the way it spread, probably similar, probably very similar, but it's definitely not as devastating. Economically, it was a little more devastating because we needed to figure out how the fuck to fight it, but that's about it. We didn't lose, 1 in 2 people. Half my family or all of my family didn't die during the pandemic, right? So people need to calm down a little bit with these comparisons. Okay. So kind of getting into that, right? The sheer scale of death is unfathomable. Whole villages were wiped out, and in cities, death counts were so high that chroniclers of the era often resorted to apocalyptic language to describe the horror. In Venice, it is recorded that at the plague's peak, some 600 people were dying every day. In Paris, the numbers were even more ghastly, with the dead numbering in the tens of thousands daily. Fucking what? It's so crazy. The Black Death led to an acute labor shortage, which dramatically altered the economic landscape. And with fewer hands to till the land, harvest crops, and conduct trade, wages for laborers rose sharply, much to the chagrin of the nobility and merchant classes. This increase in wages, however, did not translate into immediate prosperity, as the constant threat of recurrent plague outbreaks loomed over the surviving populace. They were pretty fucking scared to go back to work because they were worried about dying. Again, like a lot of people with COVID. The Black Death was COVID at the time, but, it just killed more people. So the decimation of the population also meant that there were fewer people to maintain the rule of law, and banditry increased as a result of that, especially as law enforcement became lax. It makes me think about people who are chanting defund the police. While I understand that the setup of police did come from essentially a line of racist white people who, set up a lot of systems to persecute and cause problems for the African American community. Do not think that means we need to defund them. We need to have law and order in our society. That is essential for any society to feel safe. And again, so if we have law enforcement become lax, I feel like shit like this will happen. Banditry will be increased. Desperate survivors, some of whom who had lost entire families, turned to crime in an environment where the social order was in disarray. The tales of the plague brigands who haunted the roads, taking advantage of the chaos, became common in the oral histories of the time. And in England, the economic pressures and social dislocation caused by the plague contributed to the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Laborers, emboldened by their new economic power and enraged by the imposition of harsh taxes, rose up in a rebellion that would result in thousands of deaths before it was quashed. And I will get into that in a future episode. Peasants' Revolt will be an episode probably here in it's on my list for at least within the next 10. So who knows how soon? Maybe even next week. No, not really. I wouldn't just bring it up and then arbitrarily do it. But okay, anyways. We also have the spread of pogroms that would cause some issues here. So the Black Death also led to a rise in scapegoating and xenophobia, resulting in violent pogroms, particularly against Jewish communities. Germany, always against the Jewish communities. Germany, good job. Wow, good. Weird to think about. It had been like that for 600 years prior, because literally in Strasbourg in February of 1349, several hundred Jews were burned to death. Oh my God, Germany! Come on. They were accused of causing the plague by poisoning wells. It was a baseless myth that nonetheless led to mass killings, and would be brought up and used again in future times. I'm certain you can guess when that would be used again. Okay, we also have the rise of flagellants. Okay, another response to the plague was the rise of flagellants, religious zealots who believed that the Black Death was God's punishment for sin. They were, and this is the other issue with religion back in the day, right? When you base a religion based off of hey, God's going to punish us and chastise us, and this is making us better, you can have people that come out and be, preaching repentance and make sure that, they're repenting to try and stop the plague, because they're oh God, I'm so sorry. Please don't make other people suffer. Probably because they're sad that, kids are dying. It's kind of weird that God would just kill off a bunch of babies. Really weird. And, loving and peaceful and, it's whatever. I'll get into it later. I'll have an entire episode dedicated to my thoughts on that. Anyways, they traveled from town to town, whipping themselves in public displays of penance, and their processions could number in the thousands. The flagellants, okay, now I remember how to pronounce it. Flagellants also contributed to the lawlessness, as they often incited violence and social unrest and horniness. When people would watch them whip themselves, there was a lot of people that discovered something about themselves that day, that they liked to watch people in pain. And that would cause a rise in BDSM in the German communities. That's why actually Germany now is the BDSM capital of the world. And that is a true fact. You can go ahead and look that up. It's in the show notes, but you can also just Google it real quick. Just Google German BDSM. I'm certain, and click the first link that pops up. You'll get it. So the massive decrease in population led to a surplus of land, which in turn altered agricultural practices. Some regions saw a shift from labor-intensive crops to pasturing, which required less human labor, but also changed the rural economy. Stories tell of lands lying fallow in once cultivated fields returning to forest, as there were simply not enough people to maintain them. Culturally, the Black Death had a profound impact. Art and literature took on a macabre tone, with the dance of death motif becoming popular in visual art. Chroniclers of the era, like Boccaccio in his Decameron, a collection of novellas written in the wake of the plague, document the social upheaval and the mix of stoicism and hedonism that characterized the survivors' attitudes. Which kind of makes sense. Yeah, I'd be pretty fucking stoic too if I survived the Black Death. And I'd be a little hedonistic because I'd think my life could end at any fucking moment. So I need to go out and stick my dick in all the holes. Every hole. Just, random holes even. Because, again, at that point, I would probably have convinced myself, oh, fuck, I'm going to die tomorrow. Who cares? And God already hates me and is punishing me and killed my entire family, so I'm going to hell. So it doesn't matter. And that's how a lot of people felt. And I kind of understand. I get why they felt that way. So even decades after the worst of the Black Death had passed, its shadow lingered. The social mobility it engendered would lead to the breakdown of the feudal system and the rise of a more mercantile society, so more merchant-based. But this transition was fraught with violence and uncertainty. Tales of the time tell of a world turned upside down where the dance of death united all, and the fragility of life was never more apparent. And buttholes were getting fucked daily. Daily, man. I mean, fuck, you gotta try the poophole loophole at least once. Thanks, Dan. I'm sorry I'm stealing your poophole loophole joke, but I'm just referencing it. It's a great term for it. Yeah, I can't think of like a better term, honestly. Poophole loophole, top tier term for the for anal sex. It's so good. If you haven't checked out Timesuck and you're listening to my show, check out Timesuck. And you may stop listening to my show because that show is definitely better. But hopefully one day I can match and I can, get up there. Be considered great. Who knows? Anyways, continuing on. The Black Death was a pivotal moment in European history. Its death toll was unparalleled, its economic impact profound, and its influence on the course of history enduring. Completely enduring. Very enduring even. To this day, we have very modern examples of the Black Death kind of being, or like how it impacts society and how COVID impacted society. Kind of similar. I like, it's cool and interesting to draw those parallel lines between the two. But the lawlessness and the social changes it provoked would reverberate for centuries to come, as Europe slowly rebuilt and reimagined itself from the ashes of one of the worst pandemics in human history. Okay, and now we have the German Peasants' War, right? The German Peasant War of 1524 through 1525 was one of the largest uprisings in European history, prior to the French Revolution. It primarily affected the territories of the central and southern parts of the Holy Roman Empire, and was driven by a combination of burgeoning Renaissance ideas, goddamn Renaissance, giving people ideas about uprising and shit, the influence of Reformation, economic hardship, and long-standing grievances against the nobility. So let's go over this part, right? So the war began in the southwestern part of the German-speaking region. Everyone there spoke German. They were pretty mad at the leaders, yeah. It was in the Black Forest area. This was it happened when a band of peasants, inspired by the new teachings of Martin Luther and emboldened by a series of bad harvests and economic distress, rose up against their feudal lords. From there, the rebellion spread rapidly, with peasants forming bands and armies and creating a series of demands known as the 12 Articles, which called for an end to serfdom and other oppressive practices. Goddamn Martin Luther, making people think that they should have rights and shit. How dare he do that? Goddamn Martin Luther. Okay, so estimates suggest that up to 300,000 peasants and farmers were killed in the uprising and its suppression. This number includes the casualties of numerous battles and massacres, as the poorly equipped peasant armies were often no match for the professional troops employed by the princes and dukes of the realm. Accounts from the time paint a vivid picture of the conflict. One chronicler, Sebastian Lotzer, who helped write the 12 Articles, described the initial optimism of the peasants as they sought to establish a Christian brotherhood on the basis of the gospel. However, this hope soon turned to despair as the nobility responded with force, and they realized Jesus wasn't going to come down and fuck up their enemies for them, especially when their enemies, had much better equipment, tools, and weapons. And really, if they had listened to their king, the king had told them that God told them that they needed to serve the king. So they were sinners, and they deserved what happened to them, clearly. Goddamn. Martin Luther himself initially showed some sympathy for the peasants' plight, but vehemently opposed the rebellion when it turned violent. He penned the pamphlet against the robbing and murdering hordes of peasants, in which he called for their brutal suppression, a stance that has colored his legacy quite a bit. Again, it's only, religion's only, good for you when you step in line and when you step out of line. Listen, I know I, as Martin Luther, stepped out of line, rebelled against the Pope and shit. Got protected by the Holy Roman Empire here. But, yeah, you guys aren't going to be paying me as much money as the prince over here, okay? Prince Ferdinand is going to give me like so much fucking money. So fuck you guys. I hope you all burn in hell. One of the pivotal moments of the war was the Battle of Frankenhausen in May 1525, where a peasant army was encircled and slaughtered. Thomas Munzer, a radical preacher and one of the rebellion's leaders, was captured. The first-hand despair is echoed in Munzer's own words before his execution, where he reportedly remained defiant to the end. He was like, fuck you, I hate all of you. None of you know what it's like to be me. How dare you? I hate you. And then was beheaded. In the town of Weinsberg, where peasants, just whined a lot because they were sad about, having their rights trampled upon, and, kings and princes like taking their wives or like, fucking killing them randomly or treating them like shit. They're whining about that, like, oh, boo-hoo, little cry baby's going to cry. Accounts of the peasants' revenge upon the nobility, where Count Ludwig von Helfenstein and his men were executed by being run through a gauntlet of pikes. Like a gauntlet of dicks, essentially. A brutal act that showed the peasants could be as merciless as their overlords. Good for them. Good for them. Especially if the nobility was, actually doing what I was doing, being like, boo-hoo. You're so sad. I'm so sorry that you can't feed your little tiny peasant baby. Who gives a shit, though? The little peasant babies. Now, I'm going off to go feed my little nobility baby a very special, what would the German dessert be? Like, there's German chocolate cake, but that's not really German. I'm going to go feed him German pancakes, yeah. It puffs up around the edges and it's like really yummy. My little nobility baby is going to eat that while you have to feed your little peasant baby shit. Okay. We do have a lot of secondhand accounts about this. Sorry, I'm just having a lot of fun pretending to be a little Sherman noble asshole. Go feed your little peasant baby shits, yeah. Who cares about you? Get out of here, you little stupid asshole in your peasant little penis. You got a peasant. Sorry, okay. Secondhand accounts such as those by the later historian Friedrich Engels paint the rebellion as a proto-communist uprising, a lens that highlights the class struggle elements of the conflict. Engels' writings describe the rebellion as part of the broader historical dialectic of the oppressed rising against their oppressors, a trend that repeats in history all the fucking time. The suppression of the Peasants' War led to a tightening of the feudal system rather than its relaxation. They've really tightened up the sphincter more. The ruling classes, shocked by the near success of the rebellion, had to really make sure the assholes and everything was so tight. And they really shoved the sticks up there. They definitely had sticks up the asses, okay? They became a lot more repressive because they were a little afraid that the peasants uprising again would fuck them over and they were going to die. So this led to an increased instances of banditry as the now further disenfranchised peasants sought to survive in a system that had reinforced its rigidity. And which I get, right? Like you get fucked over and you keep getting fucked over more and more and more. And you're like, well, fuck it. It doesn't matter. I can break the law because literally anything I do at this point is going to break the law and they're not doing anything for me. So fuck the law that they make. The legacy of the German Peasants' War is complex. On the one hand, it represents a tragic episode of loss and a missed opportunity for social reform. On the other, it served as a catalyst for future peasant revolts across Europe, and played a role in the eventual decline of the feudal system. The tales of the uprising and its brutal suppression would be handed down through generations. It would be a constant reminder of the violent lengths to which the ruling classes would go to maintain their grip on power. It's definitely one of those wars that changed society, especially for Germany and on Europe, right? Demonstrated the volatile potential of the oppressed when pushed to the brink and the equally violent response of those in power to try and maintain their power. Okay, and we're kind of already in the 16th century, right? I just want to go over mercenaries for hire real quick before we get into the life of Christman Genipperteinga. God damn, that name is fucking hard. I'm going to have a hard time with it today. I'm going to just call him Genipperteinga, and we're going to have fun with it. If it pisses you off, I'm sorry. It sucks to suck. But, yeah. Anyways, let's go over mercenary life real quick, because this is a very prominent part of Christman's life. He was born in like the 1530s. No, not the 1560s. But anyways, it like literally right before he was born, this shit stopped. Okay. So the 16th century was a significant time of significant military change in Europe. The Italian Wars between 1594 and 1559 raged between various European powers for control of the Italian peninsula. It was essentially a dick measuring contest between the popes and the kings. So they marked the beginning of the modern era of warfare. This period saw the rise of professional armies and, notably, the widespread use of mercenary forces. Private military groups, man, they're the shit. Or private military companies, PMCs, right? If you're a Metal Gear fan, Metal Gear. Particularly when wars ended or armies were disbanded, there was a bunch of unintended consequences from this shift in military organization. So mercenary soldiers for hire, often with no allegiance to any flag other than that the highest bidder, they were attracted by the promise of pay and plunder, and came from all over Europe to fight in the Italian wars. The most famous of these were the Landsknecht, Landsknechten from the Holy Roman Empire, Swiss pikemen, and the feared Italian condottieri, or whatever you Italian phrase that word. Okay. At the conclusion of the campaigns, or during periods of peace, these mercenaries frequently found themselves unemployed and a little restless because they needed to get back to killing. The cessation of hostilities meant that states and princes no longer had the same need for large standing armies, leading to mass layoffs of these professional soldiers, of people that you're going to very easily piss off. So the sudden release of large numbers of soldiers into society often led to economic hardship. Accustomed to the life of a soldier, many found it difficult to adjust to a civilian life. Moreover, they had been trained to fight and plunder for a living, and many were ill-suited for other forms of employment. They had literally no other fucking skills. So with few prospects, some of these former soldiers turned to banditry. They formed the robber bands, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, right? But I wanted to, at the beginning, it was more of like tales of knights and nobility that turned into this. And it was more of like the tales. This is like the legit historical reason for it. Okay, there's a bunch of soldiers that got hired by different kings and queens. They didn't know what the fuck to do after they got let go and decided to form robber bands. So they would use their military skills that they had honed on the battlefield to raid villages, ambush travelers, and extort protection money from towns. One such individual was the notorious Michael Clives, a former Landsknecht who, after the War of the League of Cognac, found himself without gainful employment. So he gathered around him a band of like-minded individuals, terrorizing the countryside of what is now southern Germany, where our story takes place. Bandit leaders often held a significant influence over their members, employing a strict military discipline within their ranks. They were, in effect, continuing the command structure of their mercenary days, which made them formidable opponents to the poorly equipped and trained local militias. The local authorities were usually ill-prepared to deal with these bands of skilled, organized former soldiers who had been very, very good at killing people because, they survived the war, right? Or they won battles. In some cases, mercenaries turned bandits could be persuaded to leave an area through bribes or by being hired as guards, effectively using state funds to pay for peace and keeping them employed. It kept the bandits or the mercenaries employed, right? Maybe letting go of a bunch of soldiers and not giving them like an out or giving them a way to earn an income. Bad idea. So the activity of these bandits had a detrimental impact on trade and commerce. Roads and trade routes became dangerous, and the cost of goods increased as merchants had to factor in the risk of bandit attacks or pay for armed escorts. And this increase in lawlessness had a broader societal impact. It contributed to a sense of instability and disorder, which in turn encouraged the development of stronger state mechanisms for maintaining public order, such as the creation of standing armies and police forces. Later, during our story today, not as much of a thing. they would kind of start getting into it, but definitely not as big. And the legacy of these mercenaries turned bandits is, like all things in history, pretty complex. While they were feared and often reviled in their day, their existence also played a role in the evolution of modern statecraft, as rulers sought to establish the monopoly on violence that is a hallmark of the modern state. The phenomenon of unemployed mercenaries turning to banditry in the 16th century illustrates the unintended consequences of the era's warfare and political machinations. It also underscored the social and economic challenges that arise at the intersection of war and peace. Challenges that are not confined to the distant past, but continue in various forms to present day. Okay, and now we're into the 1560s. Really, in the 1560s, the biggest part of this is the Reformation that happened. And I have talked about the Reformation to death in previous episodes. I'm going to give you a brief rundown. Martin Luther in 1517 nailed his 95-page thesis of what the fucks to the Catholic Church, especially condemning their use of paying to be forgiven, pay to play, pay to win, essentially in the church. It was their, battle passes. It was battle passes for heaven that Catholics set up. Great business model, perfect business model, great tagline for it. If you're interested in learning more about that, go to episode 1 of America's Origins. It's good shit. It's good stuff. Okay. Then we have the Counter-Reformation response. The Catholic Church initiated Counter-Reformation. It was a movement intended to address internal abuses and reaffirm Catholic doctrines. The movement was characterized by the Council of Trent in 1545 through 1563. The establishment of new religious orders like the Jesuits, and a renewed emphasis on missionary work. Okay, and then we had a butt ton of religious wars because a lot of people were getting wise to what the popes were doing. Okay, the differing theological positions hardened into political fractions, leading to a series of religious wars that swept across the continent. Princes and kings often chose sides not just on religious grounds, but also as a means to assert their independence from the Holy Roman Emperor or other larger powers, leading to a fragmented political landscape in what would develop modern Europe today. Okay, and the Holy Roman Empire was becoming a patchwork of territories with varying degrees of loyalty to the Holy Roman Emperor. It became even more divided as local rulers either supported the Reformation or remained loyal to the Catholic Church and their Reformation that they tried to start, right? This fragmentation weakened centralized control, as the empire was not a nation state in the modern sense, but a loose confederation of semi-autonomous entities. A bunch of people just kind of agreed that the Holy Roman Emperor was their emperor, and a bunch of people realized, but he doesn't have to be. And that caused a bunch of problems. And the Catholic Church also, the Holy Roman Emperor at the time was causing problems with the Pope, and, him basically being like, hey, so I'm the emperor, so I'm more important than you. And the Pope was like, no, fuck you, I'm more important than you. And that caused a bunch of wars. Okay. The most devastating of the religious conflicts was the 30 Years' War. It doesn't matter too much, but I felt it important to note so that way people knew my history cred. Okay. The show is all about history cred. And if I don't have history cred, then I have nothing. All right. Banditry would continue quite a bit during this time, and it would essentially reach its pinnacle while Christman Genipperteinga was in place, and a bunch of people would be dying constantly. Right, this would cause all these people to go missing. It's why we don't have a lot of detailed records. Is because of this lawlessness caused by this situation, caused by these revolts, caused by these wars that have been going on. So now that we're here, we're finally to a place where I hope that you understand where today's story is coming out of. Right. So I'm going to give you the tale of Christman Genipperteinga. Christman Genipperteinga was a German serial killer and bandit of the 16th century. He reportedly murdered 964 individuals starting in his youth over a 13-year period from 1569 until his capture in 1581. Records of Christman Genipperteinga's life survive from a book printed in 1581 or shortly thereafter in 1587. A condensed account was included in a collection of calendar histories. An even more condensed Czech translation of that account appeared in 1590. So a lot of today's, origins and like tales, a lot of speculation based off of historians' parts. What does make it compelling is the fact that the book that was printed was the same year of his murder and the same year of the pamphlet that we originally found to connect this tale and connect this person to these crimes. And the fact that there is no supernatural evidence of anything else of other notable robber bandits and serial killers from this time usually made a pact with a devil, or they're using witches' magic to kill as many people as they did. So Christman Genipperteinga came from Korpen or Kerpen. It was a town that was about 2 German miles away from Cologne. He was born before 1569. An exact date isn't known. Some people like to guess it was like in the 1550s, towards the end of the big ass holy wars that were going on. So during his reign of terror, he would live in a cave complex that was about 1 mile away from Bergkessel. It was in a wooded upland mountain area. He had a good view over the roads going to and from Trier, Metz. He was supposedly a leader of a bandit gang of sorts. And by leader, mostly he just was part of that crew and probably just killed the most people. And so people feared him the most. Okay. So on robber killers, Christman Genipperteinga fits the stereotypical standard for what they would do, right? The pattern for robber killers is, one, they hoard their gains in like a cave or some like hideout somewhere. And he would constantly attack roads, and most of his victims would come from the roads. Okay, now let's go ahead and get into a little bit more of the tale here. So the interesting part of it, right? So by 1550, the tales of Christman Genipperteinga had begun to weave a tapestry of terror across Rhineland. It was said he had expanded his operations beyond targeting travelers to roads to striking at the very heart of rural life, like small hamlets and isolated farms. Okay, so as his ambitions grew, so too did his need for resources. Hamlets and farms offered richer and more varied plunder than travelers could. So livestock, food, stores, and occasionally small hordes of coins, hoarded by thrifty peasants, were all tempting targets for a burgeoning bandit chief. The rural settlements at the time were vulnerable. They were often situated far from protection of town watchmen and without the natural defenses that larger communities might possess. So their isolation made them easy prey for any violent bandit group, especially one such as Christman Genipperteinga's. So during this time, too, his cruelty likely grew from real or embellished tales of brutality during these raids. Without a standing professional law enforcement body, retribution for such crimes was rare, allowing him to act with impunity. And in the telling, his violence became legendary. He'd grow more and more violent, more and more grotesque. He would hang entrails out at like the doors of these farms. He would constantly do, acts of sexual assault, rape, the not fun stuff that you never want to hear about. It's never good. Never a real good time. Okay. And then the growth of Genipperteinga's band would eventually culminate in about 20 men. So, right. This would be mostly due to the economic disarray of the time, as I had mentioned earlier. There was a massacre at a wedding feast, a proverbial red wedding of sorts. It was a shocking breach of social norms and hospitality laws. Even most robber bandits wouldn't do what he did here, which held such celebrations as sacred and inviolable. The choice to attack a wedding would have been both strategic, guaranteeing a concentration of victims, and valuables, and symbolic, representing a direct challenge to the established order. So It was pretty bad. So, and he left no fucking survivors at this wedding either. This would have served a dual purpose for him. It eliminated witnesses and it enhanced his terrifying reputation. The lack of survivors would mean that the only accounts of the massacre would be those of the bandits themselves, likely leading to exaggerated tales of the ruthlessness. So their kill count might have, been a little bolstered. Instead of like a couple hundred people, it was more like probably, most wedding receptions where it's like 50 people, maybe 70. And even then, maybe even less because again, it just wouldn't have been as big back then. But yeah. So, and then the impact on Trier, which was one of the cities that was nearby when the wedding happened, it would have been deeply impacted by such an event. A massacre of this nature would have reverberated through the ecclesiastical and civic institutions, prompting calls for vengeance and justice. And this is what kind of leads me to believe it more, because the Catholic Church, a powerful entity in Trier, might have responded with public denunciations from the pulpit, pressing secular authorities to take actions against Genipperteinga and his band. Such a massacre could have been seen as an act against the church itself, given the sacramental nature of the marriage. And I don't know, back and forth here on why I think it may or may not have actually happened. Mostly because more than likely the Catholic Church would have responded to this, and there would have been a lot more records about it happening. And someone tying back to either Genipperteinga or someone in his band, more likely. But at the same time, there's so many fucking robber bandits. They probably didn't care. They didn't even want to like write about it or like think about it because it was a problem they created. So it's a little hard here to discern fact from fiction, right? Okay. So there's some social consequences for this atrocity that might have actually occurred. Who knows? Socially, such an atrocity would have sown seeds of fear throughout the region. Wedding feasts and other celebrations would have been viewed with anxiety, and communal gatherings might have seen a decline as the risk of attracting Genipperteinga or other robber bandits' attention becoming more of a real fear. And the economic impact would have been immediate and severe. Villages and towns would have had to increase their expenditures on protection. And some might have resorted to paying protection money to Genipperteinga to avoid his wrath for being, that fucking evil. So, in folklore, the massacre would have been, does become an oft-told tale to warn against the evils lurk beyond society. It's just another like robber bandit tale. So from a modern historical perspective, there are no records to confirm such an event actually occurred. Would not have been entirely out of character for the period, though. It was marked by violence and upheaval. However, the lack of contemporary accounts suggests that if the event did occur, it might have been on a smaller scale or less dramatic than legends suggest. The tale of the massacre near Trier, whether the fact or greatly embellished over time, would have cemented Genipperteinga's status in the annals of dark folklore, which is why he's being spoken about today. So, and then in 1563, this is where we begin to see that he's keeping a diary. So, he was not just Christman Genipperteinga was not just a figure of terror in the physical world, but had also begun to carve his legacy into the annals of dark folklore through unusual means, a diary. Legend has it that in this year, he started to keep a meticulous record of his brutal exploits, chronicling each murder with a cold precision that was as unsettling as the act themselves. And this leads me to, again, question whether or not his story is true, because most peasants were not literate back then. The literacy rate was less than 3%. So the fact that he was able to write these down, and who knows, maybe it was just like some crude fucking like pictures of just like him committing the acts, like crayon drawings, basically. If you're like, I killed this girl. Well, I killed this girl with my crayon. It looked really cool when I drew it. Or some dumb shit like that. Oh my God. I just realized something. These robber bandits are basically Marines that couldn't get a job after the war. Could you imagine that like happened in America today? Like after Vietnam, all the Marines just banded together and like, fuck it, we're going to take over communities in America. That's essentially what happened here. Sorry. That just popped into my head. I am recording this at night after my meds have worn off. I have a very busy schedule. I've had a very busy schedule this week, so I know today's episodes get a little flip-flopping around. It's less cohesive. Again, this is a folklore tale, but I found it fascinating and interesting. And so let's go ahead and keep going here. So the existence of a diary would have served as a chilling testament to Genipperteinga's crimes. In a time when literacy was not widespread, the act of documenting one's own criminality was unusual and would have added a layer of premeditation and pride to his infamy. Meaning, again, he took pleasure in his work, like a serial killer would. So if such a diary existed, each entry might have detailed the location, method, and perhaps even the rationale behind each act of violence. Which maybe it did. I think maybe just the location, method, and like, I don't know, like how hard it made his dick or something. Like, that was only a 2-incher, boys. You need to get it to the full 3-mast, okay? If my dick is not at the full 3-mast hardness, then I didn't enjoy the murder. The murder was just a 1 out of 3 inch hard day today. All right, that's not very good. It was a 1 out of 3 stars. This would have provided a window into the mind of the bandit leader, revealing a level of calculation that belied the chaotic nature of banditry. It's true. So the public knowledge of such a diary, whether through rumor or the eventual discovery of the document, would have amplified the fear surrounding Genipperteinga. The idea that he was recording his deeds could imply that he was not just a random predator, but a methodical and unstoppable force. For the authorities, the diary would have been a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it was a record that could potentially be used to bring Genipperteinga to justice. On the other, it was a macabre catalog of their failure to protect their citizens, which is very, very fucking true. He's basically being like, yeah, I fucking did this on this day with this law officer just like not paying attention. Went in, slit this guy's throat, ripped his head off, threw it to his wife, and she screamed. The law officer just, didn't keep looking. It was Officer Jim Bob. Fuck, could you imagine? Just like some serial killer being like, yeah, so like officer with badge number 321570 was actually at the scene when I committed the crime. And there were people screaming for help. And he did absolutely nothing. Just like in the note that he leaves after he murders the people. That would be hilarious. And also gross and sickening and scary. So anyways, in the event of Genipperteinga's captured, the diary would be used in prosecutions against him, would lead him to confess his crimes, because he kind of already did through the journal. So for historians, such a diary would have been a rare and invaluable document, shedding on the lights on the realities of criminal life in the 16th century, would offer insights into the operations of bandit bands and social conditions that allowed him to thrive. So that is one thing that we would, love to have. But of course, we don't have it. We just have a book that says that he did it. We don't actually have the diary, which, again, it's important in the folklore. It definitely took on a life of its own. It contributed to the myth of Genipperteinga overall and became a symbol of his intelligence and his ego, as well as like a tangible connection to the dread he inspired, a book of death written by the hand of a killer, like like Death Note. It was Death Note, but like after the fact, like he went and killed someone. So it'd be like if Kira, instead of like having to just write someone's name down and like the method, if Kira went and did it and then came back, wrote down the name and the method of his kills, right? That would be, that's essentially what he did. He was the good old Holy Roman version of Kira from Death Note. So that's cool. Okay. So today, the notion of Genipperteinga keeping a diary is often seen as an embellishment, just so that we can note that, a detail that may have been added to the legend to emphasize his malice and premeditation. It fits neatly into a narrative tradition that seeks to understand evil by ascribing to it order and method, even when none may exist. He might have just done it, he might have just killed people for being fucking crazy. Whether fact or fiction, the legend of his diary served to deepen the aura of menace around him. Again, Germans love their macabre, like, evil stories. It was some crazy shit that they were into back in the day. Okay. So then supposedly in 1565, he reportedly attacks a small convoy of pilgrims en route to Aachen, adding to the growing tally of his supposed victims of like the 900. So this envoy Aachen was a renowned as a pilgrimage state or site. So the envoy was a bunch of like, holy men or like religious people containing relics of Charlemagne and the church where he was crowned. So it made the site significant religious importance to the Holy Roman Empire. Again, leading to me being more on the side of like this tale might be either really fucking embellished or like a little fake. Because again, the church would have said something about this event here, right? Aachen, also known as Aix-la-Chapelle, was one of the foremost destinations for pilgrims in the region, believed to bring spiritual healing and indulgence from sins. Attacking a group of pilgrims would have been seen as not just a crime against individuals, but as an affront to the church itself. So if he had a hate boner for the church, which if he was a mercenary, he might have actually had a hate boner for the church, he probably did this, right? But the church definitely would have responded here. So the convoy likely consisted of people from various walks of life, bound together by faith, seeking blessings secure. So, again, just like people who were like deeply committed to the church. People who weren't committed to the church weren't making this pilgrimage. They weren't going to fucking do it. They definitely would have been traveling with whatever valuables they had. So intended as offerings to cover expenses or to cover the expenses of their journey. And definitely made them targets for bandits. So again, just these people would have been really faithful to believe it was safe to go out during this time to fucking do this. Pilgrims often traveled with minimal protection, relying on the sanctity of their mission to safeguard them. Essentially being like, hey, I know God's having me do this, guys. You can't hurt me because God's telling me to do it. Don't hurt me. Because God will be like so mad. He'll be like so mad at you if you hurt me. This vulnerability would have made them easy prey for a well-armed and ruthless band such as the Genipperteingas. And again, such an attack would have been widely condemned by the clergy and secular authorities. And the fact that didn't happen is what causes a lot of people, when retelling this, to believe this was embellished. And this attack is mainly just to emphasize the brutality and godlessness of Genipperteinga. So whoever wrote this was just doing this to be like, okay, so this is not a godly man. This guy was basically Satan on earth. So today, historians might view this purported attack as an example of how banditry in the period could intersect with the religious life at the time, disrupting not only the commerce and travel, but also the spiritual practice of the populace. But the reported attack on this pilgrim convoy to Aachen represents a chapter in Genipperteinga's mythos, where his alleged crimes transcended mere physical violence, striking at the spiritual lifeblood of the time. And in doing so, this would elevate his status from a mere outlaw to a kind of like anti-saint in the pantheon of infamy. Again, a lot of these things, a lot of these tales about his crimes seem to just, even though they don't, he doesn't use like the devil or black magic or like witches or any of that bullshit to like kill people. The way they tell these tales and the way they're spitting it is to make him seem like he's some demon in human form. Right? He is like, he is the devil. He is the Antichrist. And that, and he's like a scary monster for that too. Okay. And then in 1568, his notoriety as bandit leader had grown significantly. So, and according to the stories, it was in this year that he orchestrated a bold, calculated attack that would further his reputation for audacity and cruelty. Is the ambush of a nobleman's carriage. So, attacking the nobility was a significant escalation in bandit activity. Nobles were often well protected and traveled with armed escorts, suggesting that his robber band had grown not only in size but in confidence and military capability. They're getting good at killing and ambushing people. So the ambush would have been carefully planned, likely involving reconnaissance and the selection of a suitable location where the noble's carriage would be most vulnerable. Such an attack would be swift and brutal, designed to overwhelm the guards before they could adequately respond. Several deaths would have resulted from the ambush, including possibly those of guards and attendants. The capture of high-value hostages for ransom indicated a strategic move to secure financial gain. They really planned this shit out, right? They were working on this, and it was actually at this time when Christman would start getting into music, like singing and stuff. And this is where his band would start to say that he is losing his mind, right? The So the noble in question who was robbed, according to the story, it might have been a local count or a wealthy bishop, one of the two. Given the basis, so like let's say like all the other accounts were true, like he attacked the wedding, he attacked the pilgrims, right? I want to bet it was a wealthy bishop if we're going down that route. Maybe he really did have a hate boner for the church. And most of it came from the fact that their songs sucked and he thought he could write them better. He would be like, what? This music is terrible. Absolutely terrible. We could do so much better. Listen to this little ditty that I made. I like to drink and fuck. I like to steal all your shit. I'm going to fuck your skulls, and then I'm going to shit in it. Da 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 da. Dirt. Yeah, I know he was a very talented guy. Again, no records of the music he made. I like to do a lot of assuming when it comes to these tales, and I figured he'd just be great at that. But so we can assume that the noble was a wealthy bishop because of that, because he hated their fucking music, because the music was all like sad and like God hates me and I need to be better and whatever. However, again, this act would have provoked a fierce response from any nobility who might have formed coalitions to track down and punish the bandit leader and his followers. Such an affront to their class would not have been tolerated lightly. This actually does kind of coincide with how he was found, where eventually, we'll kind of get into this, but eventually someone he captures does escape, goes in and forms like a band who's kind of been on the lookout for him, and they go find him, track him down in his cave, and capture him. So potentially maybe some truth here. Okay. The successful plundering, however, of a noble's carriage would have elevated his status among other bandits, potentially attracting more followers to his cause, or just getting more people to join with him on raids. So, and then in response to the attack, nobles would most likely have increased their security measures while traveling in the area. Again, there's not a lot of accounts of this, so it kind of leads more again to this belief of like, did it happen? Like, did it actually happen? Who knows? Okay, and then in 1571, this is where his story takes much darker shades here. It was said that his band of brigands, now more ruthless than ever, had committed a particularly sacrilegious act by sacking a monastery near Koblenz. And according to the stories, no one within the monastery walls was spared. All of their assholes were ripped wide open, and the bandits left a scene of utter devastation in their wake. Monasteries were repositories of wealth and often less defended than castles or fortified towns, making them attractive targets for bandits. The monastery near Koblenz was likely rich with religious artifacts, manuscripts, and the wealth of the church would have been no exception to this. And then the ferocity of the attack, which has been told, would have shocked the local population. Monasteries were seen as peaceful refuges, and the monks as non-combatants. To leave no survivors would have been a message of intimidation and a display of merciless strength, like the Vikings did quite a bit. The sacking of the monastery would have yielded significant spoils for Genipperteinga's band. Gold, silver, and other treasures accumulated by the monastery could have funded his band's activities for considerable time thereafter. And such an act, again, would have deeply troubled the Catholic Church, which held great power during this time. So again, I think that this was just something that was embellished in his tale. I don't think he actually killed everybody in the monastery. That being said, though, there was a bunch of cultural and religious ramifications that would have happened as well, and nothing's written about. There's no exact details on these events occurring, which is why it's so hard to believe that this guy was real and not just like some German myth. But at the same time, too, it's just so compelling, right? Because we do have the pamphlet of his execution date. It does seem to have been like an actual event. So, but like all the shit he did, we don't know if it's actually real. Because like there's no, when they talk about it in the pamphlet, there are like nothing, there's no other paper trail for historians to follow to be like, oh, okay. So like this did happen because like this person reported on this here and this person reported on this here. There's no fucking paper trail. What might have actually happened, they might have found some crazy dude living in a cave who was fucking someone, like raping them basically. But he was like crazy and like out of his mind. And they decided to use him as a scapegoat for everybody that had gone missing in the past few years, right? Like, okay, so this is the guy who killed them all. But yeah, there's no way he did it all by himself. So he was a bandit leader, clearly. Okay. Now here in 1573 is where he starts getting a little more crazy, a little crazy like here, right? So this was a new chapter of brutality and cunning. The murder, he was said to have murdered a rival band leader, and he absorbed essentially the guy's those guys' followers into his gang, and removing a bandit like a rival leader would represented a significant consolidation of power within the criminal underworld, making him like big dog in the area. But this actually would have been. This is possible that it actually did happen if the tales of him being a bandit leader are true, because this would definitely not have made any reports at all. And this would have been something that was passed on in oral tradition or by other people in his gang who they also tortured to get information out of. Because the authorities wouldn't have given a fuck about it. And and like the local populace probably would not have given that much of a fuck. They'd been like, great, the bandits are killing each other. That's amazing news. Cool. So, in 1574, after this supposed event occurs, and his cave of like wealth and spoils and stuff has all been built out, he reportedly kidnaps a young girl that he will forcibly impregnate. And let me go ahead and just go over this. So shortly after he took up residence in Frapsburg in Germany, Christman met an intended victim. It was a young daughter of a cooper. That is a person trained to make wooden casks, barrels, vats, buckets, and tubs, by the way. So if you didn't know that. In Bobbard on the Rhine River. She was traveling to Trier to live with her brother. He ordered her under death threats to come and live with him. And then he made her swear she would never betray him. And for the next 7 years, she served his sexual wants constantly. Whenever he went out to find new victims, he bound her ankle with a chain so that she could not escape his little cave. And he fathered 6 children with her during that time. But at birth of those kids, he killed them, pressing in their necks, like basically broke their necks and like ripped their heads off, more or less. And then he would hang up their bodies and stretch them out and sing to her. Sing, and he would sing a little song to her, like, dance, dear little children, dance. Genipperteinga, your father is making them dance for you. It doesn't that make you so happy? Tanz, liebe Kindlein, tanz, or however you say it in German. I like to imagine the song was a little more, because, again, I feel like Christman was Superman of the church for, being terrible at music. And he knew what good music was. He was very good at music. So let's go ahead and listen to another ditty that he more than likely made for his indentured sex slave. In the cavern deep where echoes play lies a family of bones. In the shadows they sway, little skeleton babies with their tiny feet. Dance beside their parents too. Such tiny little feet. Sorry, if you want to hear the rest of that, I did write out a full parody. I'll put it at the end of the episode. I don't want to bother everyone else. And again, with how kind of jumpy this episode is and it's being, I do not want to make people suffer longer than they need to, unlike Christman kidnapping the young girl and using her as a sex slave, yeah. This tale comes from the pamphlet. So, and this is how this was actually eventually lead to Christman's capture. The pamphlet's author draws a parallel with the story of Kronos, which would kind of tap into this like mythological narrative with Christman, for him fucking eating the babies and then hanging up the bones. This tale actually may very well be true. It might have been a form of psychological warfare on the behalf of the sex slave to keep her trapped and to keep her like
fucked up. Fucked up to the point where like he felt like he had complete control of her. So, and this is in 1575. After he starts doing this, and probably after the first baby gets eaten, and then its bones get hung up, and he does I made the bones sway for you, little lady. Isn't that so fun? Oh yeah, so cool. And this is where his gang gets reportedly the most brutal that it's been. Okay, it escalated to a fever pitch here, culminating what is said to be the most brutal winter campaign by most robber bandits. According to the lore, this campaign was marked by a series of violent raids that left multiple villages in flames and countless inhabitants slain, probably eaten. Maybe their babies eaten too. Who knows? He was getting really into baby meat and like eating, like hanging up their bones and stuff. It was just, it was part of like the chic of the cave. It kind of just really fit well, meshed well with the stalactites. The burning of entire villages represents a significant escalation of violence. It suggests that his actions were not merely opportunistic banditry, but a systematic campaign of terror and domination against the society. He might have just been angry at society and lashing out. This would have definitely forced local authorities to respond, though. Again, more than likely, didn't actually happen. In folklore, the winter campaign would be a grim chapter in the song of his that time, reinforcing his image as a figure of apocalyptic destruction. However, I like to think that might have been used as an excuse for the church to be like, yeah, we didn't burn down those villages. Or like maybe like local authorities or like other bandits were like, yeah, it was those guys who burnt down those villages. Definitely not us. Might have just pointed to him because it was easy and he was captured, Okay. And then in 1578, after eating about, 7 to 8 to 9 babies, this is where Christman would get captured, right? So according to the story, Christman would finally relent to his sex slave's repeated pleadings that she might be allowed to meet other people, and granted her expressed wish to visit Berkessel under the condition of a renewed oath not to betray him. Oh, yeah. He made her to swear to him. He was like, swear to me. Don't swear to God, swear to me. I'm your God now. Like Batman. Okay. But once there, seeing the little children running about the streets, this lady had a mental breakdown and went down on her knees crying. She would say, Almighty God, you know of all matters, including the oath I am bound to concerning what I should not reveal to any human. So now I will wail over my condition to the stone and despair that I, for the 7th year, have suffered and what I have had daily to witness upon my own flesh and blood. Meaning her kids getting fucking eaten by the gross rape baby daddy that was Christman. Okay, and she began to wail and weep bitterly because, of course she did. Many commiserated with her, but when anyone asked her about what her troubles were, she refused to reveal them. Meaning, like, Christman got into her fucking head, right? Until eventually she was brought before the mayor. She was urged to tell her story and assured by learned men, by reference to scripture, that if it was a matter of life in the soul, then she ought to confess. And at that point, she felt like she could confess everything, so she did. In order to catch Christman off guard, the following scheme was hatched. She was given a sack of peas, and with these, she marked the way to the cave complex. And then on the 27th of May, 1581, 30 armed men set out to capture him. He was asleep when they came. He probably just got done eating a brand new baby because she had made him relax with gentle words while she deloused his hair. Like, just kind of like scruffled up his hair a little bit. She's like, oh, my big man, my big little baby eating man, you little, bitch. But then as the armed men barged in, Christman cried out, oh, you faceless betrayer and whore. Had I known this, I would have strangled you so long ago. But the sex was good, but mostly eating your babies was really good. I really got into it. So within Christman's cave complex, an immense amount of booty was found. A lot of booty. A shit ton of ass. Not just child ass that he ate because he was a gross fuck. But the gold, the silver, and everything else he had stolen. So dried and or salted meat. And again, this is all come from the pamphlet, the one document that we have. The value was estimated as exceeding 70,000 gulden. The author of the 1581 account notes that one might well have made a fair a fair out of the booty found in Christman's cave. He had a butt ton of wealth, which again does kind of lead to the idea that he probably was a robber bandit, and he did lead a gang, or like at least was somewhat in charge of a gang. Okay. And then after this, we have his confession, trial, and execution. So again, kind of going back to this diary. So it was said that Christman kept a diary where he detailed the murders of 964 individuals, as well as a tally of the loot gained from them. The diary was found among his possessions. In addition to the evidence, Christman readily admitted to the murders, adding that if he had reached his goal of 1,000 victims, he would have been satisfied with that number. He only wanted to get to 1,000. You know, he only had like, what was that, 964? So he just needed a good 36 more, and he would have gone there. So, you know, good for him. And then on the 17th of June of 1581, Christman Genipperteinga was found guilty and was condemned to death by the breaking wheel, a medieval torture or execution device, also known as the Wheel of Catherine, or simply the wheel. It was a torture method used for public execution primarily in Europe from antiquity and through the Middle Age. It resulted in the breaking of bones of a criminal or bludgeoning them to death. The practice was abolished in Bavaria in 1813 and in the Electorate of Hesse in 1836. The last known execution by the wheel took place in Prussia in 1841. In the Holy Roman Empire, it was a mirror punishment for highwaymen, street thieves, and was set out for the Schackenspiegel for murder and arson that resulted in fatalities. The people who were typically convicted by the wheel were murderers, rapists, traitors, and or robbers. So again, leading us to guess he was more than likely an actual robber bandit. I mean, like everything from the pamphlet points to him actually being a robber bandit. So like all these other tales might have happened. I don't know. This is where it gets tricky, and it gets like hard to like discern fact from fiction. But the one thing that I am sure of that did occur was during his execution, he did sing a song out loud while and supposedly over the 9 days that his body was being broken by the wheel. That's right. They kept him alive for 9 days to keep torturing him. And on the 8th day, right before he died, he sang them a song so that his heart, would be strengthened a little bit. And so that way, like he didn't feel so bad about his bones getting broken. So let me go ahead and sing that song for you guys, because I know you love it so much. And now end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, but I missed the last 36 of my victims at each and every highway. And more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, like those 36 I didn't kill. Then again, too few to mention. I was so fucking close. I did what I had to do. I had to eat little babies. I saw it through without exemption. That fucking whore. I planned in each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. There were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit out the bones of those babies and did it all. And I stood tall and then he died. And that's how most German tales end, is with them dying like that. So, no, but for real, like he would die after those 9 days of being on the wheel. The torture is supposedly excruciating, which if he really did eat those babies and torture that girl and did everything else that he supposedly did, he fucking deserved it. I'm glad that he was tortured for 9 days straight and kept alive during that time. So, the historian Joe Wiltenberg performed a close study of the popular crime reports from the 16th and 17th centuries. The primary aims to investigate where and how such works were produced, or who had authored them, who read and collected such reports, and what particular crimes were principal concerns in these works, and how such questions may have had different answers for different times. This is where we're going to get into some of the evidence about this being potentially true. Only tangentially does she seek to probe the authenticity of the individual conserved crime reports. That is, resolving the problem of how the discourse of crime accurately or inaccurately portrayed actual crime on the local scale. As noted by her, concerning early modern Germany, was in the 1570s that reports of robber bands multiplied, reaching its peak in the 1580s. Furthermore, she observes economic conditions for the poor worsened notably about 1570. At the same time, that inflation cut increasingly into real wages. Climatic change brought about a period of unusually harsh weather in the Little Ice Age that started in the 1570s and continued into the first decades of the 17th century. Harvest failures caused severe hunger and disease. Reports of crime such as witchcraft reached their height during this period of most intense social dislocation. And the story of Christman Genipperteinga belongs, therefore, in a literary and social context in which such reports were particularly frequent relative to immediately preceding or succeeding periods, and should be interpreted with that in mind. For example, as Wittenberg points out, the peak in report survival from the 1580s is partially explained by the 1588 death of report collector Johann Wick, whereas the historical context from other sources does not yield evidence for a comparable decline of crime in the 1590s relative to the 1580s. A contemporary witness who confirms the large increase in such reports was the preacher Leonhard Breitkopf. In a sermon from 1591, he wrote, "When I was still young, 40 or 50 years ago, there was not so much known about all the horrible deeds of murder, such as nowadays are described every year in all sorts of papers." So this is where we're going to kind of get into the argument if this story is true or not. I am of the belief they found some crazy dude in a cave who actually did rape and eat babies, basically. Well, rape the girl and then eat the babies. I think he did do that. The pamphlet is true. There's no other way that he could have amassed the wealth without having like a band of goons essentially assist him. So, but I do not think that he killed 964 people. There's no fucking way that he actually did that. I think that's been exaggerated. I think a lot of tales about like the attacks on the churches and whatnot were embellished. And then later in folklore too, there would be like other names given to him. So you'd have like Christoph Gripentinius or Christoph Genipperteinga, Christoph Gropurung, the cannibal. There's lots of, he would get like a bunch of different names. There's also the tale Murderers, the Cannibal Screamed by Johann Joseph Pock in his 1710 Elivium Gruesome Scientiarum, which would be, kind of about more murderers. There is a couple other alternative tales about Lippold and the Lipposchule, which was, again, really close to Brunkensen, now in the town of Alfred. The very similar tale here. Then we have the robbers Daniel and Gorchmichael Wolfgang Menzel. Then we have Schwarzer, Friedrich, Henning, and Clemens, other notable robbers, and the robber Vieting and Pampidone, who was believed to have lived in a cave close to the village of Utrecht near Ratsburg. And also like Gorchmichael to have revenged himself on their common children when he understood he had been betrayed by his woman. So his tales seem to have like spun a bunch of other tales and a bunch of other accounts into this as well. But a lot of those were also, again, they would make a pact with a demon. They'd, get some like witch powers going on. And his tale in the pamphlet is the only one without any of those accounts really happening. There are a few other notable ones without like demon or like black magic being utilized. So I'm going to put this in the bucket of plausibly happened, but I'm not going to hold my breath if I find out that it didn't happen. And that brings us to the end of today's historical Quarrel. Ooh, spooky. Thanks for listening to today's episode, guys. Again, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to do this like true crime kind of like with history, right? Because I feel like I want my show to be more historically accurate, and I do not have the amount of time right now. I feel like that it would take to like get concrete information. Like I feel like I'd have to like go to a college, or I'd have to like message somebody in German to be like, hey, can you like get me every record that you have on this guy, right? And so that's why like I feel like blending with stuff that like we do have a lot of documented evidence about, and to understand like the culture around a tale, and then just like telling the story. And then really sometimes it's about like getting the story. Maybe next time, I think next time what I'm going to do, right, is I'm going to do what I did at the beginning. And then I'm legit just going to go get the book, and I'm going to read the book or like the tale itself, or like a very shortened version of it, like a 15-20 minute version of it. And then, but here's the problem though. I had fun doing those like dumb little song bits. I probably didn't incorporate them as good as I could have into the story and like made them fit. I tried to by making him seem like he was a harsh music critic of the church, but I probably could have found a better way to do that. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I'm being too harsh on myself. I had fun doing this episode. Thinking about doing like the little mini series that I was thinking about doing. I was thinking about just like doing like a short, like 10-minute explanation of like ancient serial killers. Be like, hey, so like this serial killer in here reportedly did so and so, and like this is like everything that they did, like as fast as possible, and to like make the show as fast as possible. And it might just be something I do on YouTube. If you want to see that, let me know. Because like that'll be quick. Might have one or two like mini jokes in there, just like a mini tiny joke, just something quick and easy to digest instead of like my fucking minute and a half long rendition of My Way, but with a shitty German accent. So I thought it was fun to end the show with. So hope you enjoyed it. That is it's kind of it for me today. Next week we're going to be doing we're going back into the standard, the good old classic here with our show, where we like to do like little battles and stuff, or little interesting quarrels that happened in the past. And so next week we're going to be returning to that format after having gone through what has been like 2-3 months now of me essentially like trying to prove a theory of mine through my podcast on why I thought like religion had impacted society in the way that it did for America, and then for Christianity and the pagans. So like their quarrel was epic. So yeah, it's a good time here on this podcast. Y'all better believe that. If you guys liked today's episode, despite it being as wacky as it is, please leave a review. Tell me your honest opinions on it. Don't care if your review's 1 star. Don't care if your review's 5 stars. I just want your honest thoughts on it. I want honest feedback, so that way I can know what all you want from me exactly regarding this. And maybe you don't like me doing serial killer stuff. In which case, that's fair. That's fine. That's fine. I don't care. If it's it continues to be something that, then again, if I want to do it every now and then, I might do it. But if I don't want to do it, then we'll see. I don't know. If you guys don't want it, then it might be something that I just do very rarely and sporadically when I feel like I really want to do it. Because at the end of the day, this show is something that I want to do for fun. I'm not adherent to a bunch of people yet. So I don't have people depending on me for this. This is something that I do because I enjoy it and I have fun doing it. And I do want to grow it though. That is true. So listening to feedback. See, this is what happens when I record late at night after my medicine's worn off. My brain can't think straight, and I like to go back and forth quite a bit. I do a bunch of mental jumping in my mind, and it definitely impacts things. So I'm gonna end today's episode here, and that's gonna be it. So you guys have a good one. Love you. Spread the chaos. Bye. Start to gentle sway. The skeleton family dances in a skeletal ballet. With a kink and a clap in a loving display. In the cavern deep where the skeletons stay. Through the stalactites moonlight softly steams, illuminating the dance like in skeletal dreams. Tiny fingers clattering in a playful spree. Skeleton parents watch with joy and glee. Lots of little skeleton babies all over the floor. Look how they dance and look how they sway. Da 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 da.